Hello, and welcome to The Generalist. If you've just recently got into tree climbing, one of the things you're going to probably be looking at purchasing or making for yourself is a personal lanyard system. Now, an adjustable lanyard system is something that is very convenient to have when you're up in the canopy. The two main things that I use my lanyard system for is either stabilizing myself if maybe I'm limb walking and I'm quite a ways out from my tie-in point and I need to do something. I also use it as a lifeline when I'm advancing my main climbing line. Now, the lanyard I have here I made using one strand of 8mm accessory cord, 2 locking carabiners, and 1 tending pulley. Now the tending pulley is not absolutely necessary, but it makes life a lot easier because it gives you the ability to adjust the lanyard with one hand instead of having to use 2 hands, one to advance the line and another one to tend the Blake's hitch. Now, let's get to making this lanyard. Alright, so like you saw in that first part, this is the lanyard system that I use. What I have here is the 2 carabiners I used for my lanyard system are a screw lock black diamond Pearabiner and I believe this is a Fusion Quicklock Carabiner. Now, I use this as the end that just goes straight to my harness. This end will always stay on my harness, and so I like this one because it locks up really good and I know it's not really going to go anywhere. Whereas on the active end, the part that I'm always moving and adjusting, I have this Quicklock Carabiner, which makes things a lot easier. It's way easier to unlock this with one hand and just throw it around a branch and then just clip it onto itself. But briefly going over how I made this, what you're going to do is you're going to take your length of rope. Now, the size of rope you use will probably vary a little bit. I personally go a little bit on the thinner side just because that's what I have lying around. I have this 8mm accessory cord from GM Climbing. It's not the best stuff in the world, but I don't really want to go about cutting up my nice climbing lines like this Edelweiss right here. I don't really want to make them shorter, so I just go with this 8mm accessory cord I have. And I've been using it for 2 years and it's been working fine, but if you're looking at purchasing cord to use, I would probably go a little bit thicker, maybe somewhere between the 9 and 10mm range I think would be a good thickness for something for lanyard making. Now, I'm just going to untie the knots that I put in this when I was kind of experimenting with it. But so right here we have just some cord. To choose what length you want to use, first you're going to want to tie into the end of the rope, so you have a big spool of it maybe. First, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to tie the end that goes to your harness before kind of pulling out how much you'll think you're going to want for the working end and cutting the rope off at that length. I don't really know what exact length I have here. It looks like it's I'd say it's around 12 to 16 feet of rope that I have right here. But also that might vary just a teeny bit how much you want, just based on your height and also the size of the rope, because your knots might take up a little bit more space, something like that. So first start with the working end of the rope. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is, so you take this, we have this loop down here, and first I'm just going to tie a Blake's hitch onto this piece of the rope, keeping in mind that the bottom of this is going to be connected to my harness, so I want to tie the Blake's hitch with the slack line coming down this way, so you're creating a bigger loop as you go. But so first we're just going to tie that Blake's hitch on there. Since you're going to be moving this line around a lot, Blake's hitches do have a tendency to kind of like wiggle out that slack piece, so you always want to back it up with just a little, maybe just a little overhand knot, and just keep an eye on it. And now we just have a loop with a Blake's hitch on it with the load-bearing end on this side. So this end being the end that you would pay out into the tree and clip back to your harness. So this is just going to be the end that's always attached to your harness. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to tie a figure 8 so that you can get as close to this end of the Blake's hitch as possible. That's the load-bearing end of the Blake's hitch. So you can kind of just tie a figure 8 and work it in there until you get the exact length you want. I mean, leave a teeny bit of space between the figure 8 and the Blake's hitch. That looks just about good. I'm going to take out a little bit here. But yeah, you want to leave just a little bit of space between, you want to leave a little bit of space in between your Blake's hitch here and the figure 8 that's going to go to your harness, in case you want to put a tending pulley on there like I have. On this one right here, you see I have it fixed on this piece of rope so that it can work with the Blake's hitch and then the figure 8 behind it. So now you have the end that's going to clip and stay on your harness with the figure 8, and then that goes up into your Blake's hitch. And now this end is just going to be the slack end of the rope. So when you have it on your harness, this end will just be whatever slack you pull out to tighten your lanyard right there, okay? And now this end is just going to be all of your working end up until whatever point you tie a figure 8 on the end, or cut it off and tie a figure 8 on the end for your working end that's going to be on and off your harness as you move about the tree and utilize this lanyard. Now, my recommendation for how long you make this, I think there's some lengths that are more optimal than others, but I've found that just for manageability, the best length to have this rope is so that when you have it clipped on your harness, you want it to be about 4 times the length from your harness to the tips of your toes. Just because when it's about 4 times whatever that length is, when you have the main hard point attached to your harness with the Blake's hitch on it, the adjustable side, and your working end attached to your harness just when it's stowed and you're not using the lanyard, in that situation you want it to be a length such that when you pull slack out through the line, when you have both ends attached to your harness, the bottom of your working end and slack end don't go past your feet, just because then it's a little bit less likely that you're going to get your foot wrapped through it or something if you're limb walking out. But I also just like to tuck these kind of tails into what I like to do on this Metolius Waldo harness I have is there's these nice little elastic loops on the leg loops so that you can kind of tuck away the ends of your lanyard when you're not using it, so it just stays nice up and stowed on your harness, so that it's now, when it's been halved again, it just kind of rides at about knee length, and this will just be stowed. You can just kind of tuck this into a leg loop or something, but yeah, you just want it so that when your working end and your harness end, when they're both attached to your harness, don't barely make it to your toes, not really going past your toes at all. And that is how you make an adjustable lanyard. Now, the thing I was talking about earlier is that you can put a tending pulley on here. Now, if you're using a thicker rope and you got kind of you got a little bit more stuff lying around, the best thing to do would be, instead of using a Blake's hitch, tie 2 figure 8s down here and then kind of get a hitch climber setup going. So you have a hitch climber pulley fixed to this rope, with the pulley being on this end, and you have your hitch climber hitch. I've heard so many different names for the hitch climber hitch itself, but I don't know which one's right. I don't even remember what the last one I heard was. But I just like using the Blake's hitch on here because Blake's hitch works well. You don't have to figure out what size accessory cord works best with your rope, because the Blake's hitch is pretty much the only knot or one of the few nuts that when you tie, the only friction nuts that when you tie it on a rope of the same diameter, it just works. Whereas if you were to put a prusik of 8mm accessory cord on an 8mm accessory cord, you're going to have to get a lot of wraps going, much more than the typical 3 wraps to get it to give any friction on that rope. But yeah, one more recommendation I will make is that if you do decide to put a tending pulley on there and you're also using a Blake's hitch, is the easiest way to do that, I found, was to just lash the tending pulley to the rope itself, instead of doing what you would do in a hitch climber situation where you would have your hitch climber pulley and your hitch going and you can tie it on. Because usually when you're doing those hitch climber knots, you have a split tail and you would be putting weight on both ends of the split tail. But on a Blake's hitch, you only really have one end that you'd be putting weight on, even if you did use something like a split tail. The other end doesn't do any work. It just holds the knot in place. So I think the best way to do that is on the load-bearing end of the Blake's hitch, between the Blake's hitch and the figure 8 with the carabiner that goes to your harness, is I just used some climbing tape and put this pulley on here, and then I lashed it on there with some paracord and then put more climbing tape over that. And that was a pretty new addition. I've done that for I've used this on about 5 to 10 climbs, and it works fantastically. I love having that hitch climber pulley in there because I can just pull it through with one hand, whereas I used to have to only operate it with one hand because you need one end to tend to the Blake's hitch and another hand to pull the rope through. So it's very nice to have that pulley on there, and you can pick up some pulleys really cheap on eBay and Amazon and stuff. So I would definitely recommend getting a little pulley along with your accessory cord and carabiners to make your lanyard real nice and adjustable. Well, that's all I have. Have fun, climb safe, always wear your helmet, and be nice to the trees. You know, use cambium savers if you're doing double rope technique, or do single rope technique.